Hey YouTube, today I have a great call with my friends in Canada. Sal and Alex are going to be answering my questions from are the tax laws going to change? What do we have to file each year? What's going on with the Canadian government? What kind of visas can you work with under in the US? How do the LLCs, how are the LLCs being taxed in the US? How are we opening bank accounts in the US for our foreign clients? We're going through a whole list of stuff. I'm going to see if the team can put time trackers at the bottom so you can skip forward to topics that are more interesting for you. But just to get started, to jump right into it, thanks, Sal and Alex, for being here. When is Canada going to be the 51st state of the United States?
To go Trudeau, no chance in hell.
Trudeau's not the president, the
Prime,
prime
Min-
minister. What do you call the king of Canada?
Prime Minister.
The prime minister anymore. So he's not the he resigned or he is resigning, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me about that process because I'm really pretty ignorant. I don't watch the news. I'm not ignorant about tax law or about a lot of stuff, but like in terms of current events and news in other countries, I'm not that knowledgeable. So Trudeau's been was there for like 8 or 9 years for a long time, and he just resigned.
Yeah, so Trudeau was in the government for last 9 years, and he just resigned January 9th, Salman, I believe. He just resigned, yeah. So he was not doing well in politics. So he also have some uh, scandals, and so people were not so happy with the Trudeau administration.
Uh, Has
So
that happened before? I don't think I've seen a president like resigning. That doesn't happen in the U.S. Presidents don't just resign; they get impeached or
It
their time goes.
happens in all the countries. Like UK Prime Ministers change by the weather. So, especially in recent years, there's been so many changes. So it does happen. Yeah.
Okay, it just doesn't. I don't think it ever happens in the U.S. But
just
um,
because the US has the presidential system and all that stuff, and we Commonwealth countries, we have the parliamentary system.
Exactly.
So that might be one of the reason.
Yeah.
yeah.
Because if it
Well,
was in the US, the whole government would collapse because like it's literally the head of it's not it's a different way of government.
it is I guess different. You still have people proposing laws. You have a system enforcing the laws. Then you have like the parliament leaders. I mean, we don't have to make this an educational system or an educational video on how the parliamentary system works. But how long do people usually stay in power as the head of Canada?
Yeah, they're
Four or
going long.
five.
So the prime minister in Canada, it's two terms of 5 years, so it could be 10 years total, and he was there for like 8,
He was
9 years.
there
okay,
for nine.
9. Okay, so now when is there going to be a new prime minister?
So Canada has elections in November 2025. But in the meantime, the Labour Party, so the
The
Trudeau's
Labour Party.
party, they will elect another presidential candidate for till November.
Okay, and so it's this year. So now the bigger question and what we've been leading to is what is that going to mean for taxes? Is that do these guys change tax law?
No, so it's the same party, so it's not going to change that much. Now,
No, I mean like the new prime minister coming in November. Could they potentially change tax law?
yes, because what we're expecting now is the Conservative Party going to come in, which is Pierre Poilievre, and they're much more inclined towards pro business, and they're looking. That's sort of what obviously once they get elected, that's when we actually see the manifesto come to play. But it's expected that it's going to be much more pro business, but it's also going to be much more pro free trade, which Trump is completely against. So that's going to be an interesting power play there, right?
Free trade. How is Trump against free trade compared? You mean like
Tariffs.
oh like free trade like that. So like VAT and sales taxes, getting rid of that or like reducing that greatly?
Well, no, Trump wants to enforce tariffs, right, on Canadian imports or Chinese, all of them, right? Europe, China, everywhere, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's how he's gonna push. He's gonna make tariffs so crazy that the only option for the country is to make them the 51st state.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, let's
Now,
see.
how have like the threat of tariffs changed things in Canada since Trump has won the election, but he's not technically the president yet? How has the threat of the tariffs changed it, if anything?
Yeah, so basically, Trump is saying that he will put like 20% tariff on the automobile industry. Like Canada is exporting automobile to the US, so Trump is strictly against that. Trump wants US to produce automobiles and don't import stuff from Canada. So he's more leaning towards a 20%, 10 to 20% tariff in the automobile industry.
That's interesting.
Specifically on Canada, he's more interested in increasing tariffs on cars and lumber, because
Yes.
apparently we export a lot of lumber to there. So those are two industries that's going to be impacted a lot if that does go into play. The good thing is most of the folks that you and I deal with who are service-based companies and SaaS companies and all of that stuff, that's probably not going to be as much impacted.
But
But
we never knew. Maybe he put some taxes on consulting or service based business. Like if we as Canadian corporations providing services to our U.S. clients or U.S. companies, so he might impose some taxations. Right
so
now
the whole
we
thing you were
don't pay
talking about,
taxes.
yeah,
It's interesting that that is potentially something that could happen if money's paid to consultants or people outside of the U.S. Potentially there would be a withholding tax actually applied.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's not refundable. You can't do 1120F and you can't claim that as a refund. If like even if you have no physical presence in the US, you still have to pay the tax.
that is a possibility that he could
That is
do
a
that.
possibility, yeah.
Yeah.
But one good thing Trump is doing, he is eliminating the worldwide income rule for expats in the US. Like if someone US citizen living in Canada, he's not required to report his worldwide income. So most of the
I mean he's talked about that. I don't know if he's going to
he's
actually
talked about
do that.
many things. Yeah, 51st state and
Talked
all
about
that stuff.
many things. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I was trying to. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff he's talking about. It seems like the tariff thing is something they're definitely going to be pushing more on. Uh, I'm really interested about this. The Canadian changes too. There's like a whole change in government over there. Does this change how the CRA enforcement's done? Have you seen any changes with CRA enforcements, audit levels? Is there any news coming out of the CRA in Canada?
Up until June 24th, last year, 2024, capital gains were included into your income as half of, basically, if you made a $100,000 gain, it would be included in your income at $50,000, right? From that date, it got included at 2/3, so 67%. That was passed by, like, it was awaiting parliamentary, I think the right word is assent or parliamentary approval, but
Mhm.
Parliament got sort of paused or kind of halted during this after Trudeau resigned, right? So it's kind of in a limbo state right now. But as far as the lawmakers are saying, they still have the right to enforce that. And if the new prime minister comes and the parliament resumes and then they cancel it, then it can go back. But right
Oh,
now,
so it could potentially get canceled. Right now, it's not really enforced yet.
it's not in. Let's say it's perpetually parliament does not start at all for 6 months. Let's just say it would still be in force, right? So CR is still rolling out
Wouldn't that
tax
be
forms and
shown on the
everything.
tax forms? Like, however the forms you come supposed to fill them out, there would be like a line for that, right?
Exactly. So CR is still rolling those lines out, assuming that that's going to go into effect.
Interesting. And if it
The-
changes, people can request refunds or whatever.
exactly. So they have a funny way of doing things there. So for example, even with there was a law that came for trusts. So they kind of forbade trust, and then they rolled that out, and then later last minute they canceled it. So it's it's a funny way of doing things there. Yes.
I
Yeah.
think right now they are struggling with the parliament, so they have more focus on establishing a maintained government in Canada. That's what I think. So they are not more focused on the taxation side of the things, and also the new elections are coming in November. So more probably they'll do their campaign for the new elections rather than doing amendments in the taxation.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's really interesting. How many political parties are there in Canada? You have like 5 or 6 or 7 or something?
The main are the three, yeah.
Yeah. So just like the US, right? So one is the Liberal Party, which is Trudeau's party. Then there's a Conservative, which is probably going to come into power in November. And then there's a very small party called NDP. And that's helping Trudeau stay in power, or that's helping the Liberals stay in power because their small minority stake and Liberals having less than 50% is making the coalition government. So it's interesting because that's a good segue into what I was thinking about, is that yes, there's going to be a voting within the Liberal Party, and they're going to elect the new prime minister, and Liberals will continue on until November. But there is a small chance that if that's that party, the NDP, if they don't like the new prime minister, they could just pull back their support and have a no confidence vote. You could have a completely new, fresh elections happening possibly any time from between now till November. That is a possibility.
Oh, a vote of no confidence.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like the
yes,
Galactic
for sure.
Senate. Wonderful. So the tax. So if the new conservative guy wins in Canada, how fast does it how long does it take to get the tax laws changed in Canada so that there's much lower tax rates? Like, what are the odds that it goes down to like a 20% flat tax for all people in Canada? Like, they just lower taxes remarkably.
Bureaucracy in Canada is much slower because you need to go to the parliament and everything, and then you need to get royal assent from the king. So which is more of like it just needs to be done. There's not much that stops there, but it is a drawn out process. Yes, so it's not as quick.
Well, everything's slow. So is it like a year, 2 years?
Probably less than a year. It's probably
Probably,
in
probably a year.
Okay,
yeah.
it's not bad. So I have that's really interesting, the update. So in summary, Trudeau just resigned because people didn't like him, and yeah, I guess he wasn't doing a good job. I guess people were pretty unhappy. Based on the people I'm talking to, they're pretty unhappy with the state of Canada and how it's gotten. Without making any comments myself, I'm just kind of bouncing what I've heard. So he resigned. They're gearing up for new elections. I've seen the conservative guy you're talking about. He seems pretty funny, like the way he does interviews and stuff. He's pretty nonsense. I saw one where he was like eating an apple. He's like, "What are you talking about?" And then he was just like, just threw the apple on the ground. That was really cool. So, that's gonna happen like November. The CRA, nothing's really changed. But I want to jump into compliance now because we're in the new year, and I want to talk a little bit about like what people have to file, what forms have to be completed, so that people are aware. So right now, if you tell me about the due dates and the deadlines for most people in Canada, like Canadian companies, Canadian individuals, because you guys do a calendar year, January to December as well, right?
So
Yeah. So tell me about that.
personal tax filing deadline is April 30. And the corporate tax payment deadline is March 31st, but filing deadline is June 30th. So these are the filing deadlines in Canada. And in Canada, we don't have like LLCs or partnerships, which are due on March 15 in the US. So we don't have like these kind of companies in Canada.
So is most of the information reported to the government already in terms of like if someone has a job, it's pretty easy to do their taxes?
Yes, February 28th is the deadline for filing the tax slips with Canada Revenue Agency. In the US, it's January 31st. In Canada, it's February 28th.
That's nice. It's annoying to file your 1099s by January 31st. I have to make a video about that now. That one will probably go up before this one. What about people that leave Canada? I know we talked about this briefly before, but if someone left Canada before the end of 2024 and they have to do their final tax return or indicate to Canada that they left, how is the form different? How is that filing different?
So that filing is different because they need to deem dispose their assets in the Canadian tax returns, and certain assets fall in that category, just like stocks, Canadian stocks, properties owned outside of Canada if they stayed more than 60 months in Canada, then the properties they owned outside of Canada they have to deem dispose. Stocks, bonds, these kind of things. No Canadian property but foreign properties. So they have to deem dispose and pay the departure tax, unrealized tax, capital gain tax.
But
Okay,
you
and
could defer.
is that on a separate form or on the regular capital gains forms?
It's on the regular capital gain tax form, but we have to attach some separate forms with that as well, like T1243 and the other forms, T1161.
Okay. And then if you are Canadian and you have an LLC or you have a foreign company, you have to do the T1134, and that goes attached to your personal tax return in Canada.
Yes,
Yes,
but the
but it
deadline for filing the T1134 is 10 months after the fiscal year ends. So the fiscal year is ending on December 31st. So 10 months after the fiscal year means October, the end of October.
That's so interesting. So why
Yeah.
is that the date? I mean, well, I say why is that the date? So it doesn't go attached to the regular personal income tax return?
You
it
can
can.
do attach with the regular income tax return, but you can also file it separately from the
Yeah,
regular
I
tax return.
because it's an information return. They just ask you to fill it, and they're allowing you that sort of leeway so that you can get your finances in order, like your financial statements in order and everything. because those go as part of the return. Obviously, if you do say that you don't have them ready, even by then, that is also a possibility, and that's also acceptable.
Very interesting. Do you guys have any court cases or any examples of the CRA challenging LLCs or other companies for doing business in Canada? Any examples that we can bring up that we can talk about?
I think I've also mentioned that with you in the last video. So there was a guy who was doing some day trading or Coinbase in through his LLC in the US, and CRA demanded data from the Coinbase for all Canadians doing investment through an LLC or individual. So he caught in that record, and he was fined $12,000 or $13,000 fine by the CRA.
And that was for an investment?
Yes, that was for an investment. He was doing Coinbase and other day trading through the LLC, and he was not reporting that LLC to Canada.
Interesting. But that wasn't like an audit or a big case. He just reported it late and it was only a $12,000 penalty.
It's 2,500 per year. So he was doing it for multiple years. Like he was doing it, I think, from 2020 or 2019.
I'm talking about an example where then Canada taxed the actual LLC for doing business in Canada.
Canada can tax the LLC for doing business in Canada if the LLC has physical presence in Canada. Like
But
if,
let's say there's one owner and the owner is a Canadian living in Canada. That's like would be the argument, right?
yeah,
You're right. No, you're right on that. It's just that we don't know of any cases of that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there might have been instances. When I said cases, I meant instances where there would have been lies. It's just that probably nobody. It was in
But
large.
they didn't take him. They didn't take him to court or challenge
Exactly.
it. So we go to the okay. So yeah, that's what exactly. Sure,
Yeah.
that makes sense because that's what happens in the U.S. Obviously, if you don't agree with an IRS position, you can hire an attorney and go to tax court and push through and get seen by a judge and show your case and do all that stuff. And usually, it's done for a a higher amount of money. I went over one of my last videos. I went over a court decision in the video about this company that was deemed to have a trade or business in the U.S. And that was like the penalty. The IRS was assessing like $20 million a year for 3 years. So it ended up being a lot of money on the assessment. And it was for an investment fund with a hedge fund manager. And it was like it's really interesting. But that's how they determined what's a U.S. trade or business is exactly what I'd been saying all the time. And it's cool to see them applying the actual facts, the code section, 864 to like determine if you have a U.S. trade or business. I wish we get some examples in Canada so we'd have a better outline or guidelines.
Could you repeat that? Sorry. Well, what did they apply?
They applied the code sections of the Internal Revenue Code. Like 864 is one of the common provisions of what like a trade or business, defining what is a trade or a business or effectively connected income in the United States. So the hedge fund manager, in short, was directing the funds, getting paid commissions, doing a lot more than just a nominal thing. So they determined that they were having a business and they should have withheld taxes on the income generated by the fund. And it was audited for years 2006, 2007, 2008. So they made all this money, probably lost it all in 2008, 2009, and don't know how they're going to pay the taxes. But it's
Wow.
it was an interesting case. But yeah, we don't have any. It seems like we don't have any good cases to which we make our guidance. Because now with that case that we have, now we can say like this is what not to do. In short, right? The judge is looking for this. Don't do this. Avoid this. Make sure the contracts say you're not doing this. And that's where I've had some issues. Oh, and now so I'll explain something I've been like exploring. So I have some clients that have multi-member LLCs. I talked to a guy today whose wife is Filipino. They spend half their time in Canada, half in the Philippines. They're tax residents in the Canada. But the guy is going to make his brother-in-law the main manager, the main operator, the general partner of the LLC, and that's the methodology by which he's going to say there's no U.S. business. I mean, there's no Canadian trade or business because it's being managed by someone else. So that was kind of like what I was telling him to do to reduce risk in Canada.
in
Yeah,
in this in the case which you're explaining now, so he made his brother the general partner in the LLC, like he
yeah.
gave him 1% or 0.1% shares in the LLC and make
I
him a
might have been 10 or 15% of ownership, and then he made him the general partner. So on the U.S. tax returns, that guy's going to show up as the general partner, and then the Canadian guy's going to show up as the limited partner.
Got you. Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
it's better than just owning it all, right?
Hmm.
I
Yes, right.
understand it
It's
can still be challenged.
We had a client that did the opposite. So she was in the US. She didn't want to have the form 5471 filing, 5471 filing, and she made somebody else the shareholder, a family member, so that she wouldn't be required to do that.
In the US or in Canada?
In US, so she was in the US, but she had a Canadian company. She moved from Canada to US, and after she moved, she didn't want to do the 5471
good.
filing, so she's made somebody else the shareholder
In Canada.
in
In
Canada.
Canada, yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool to have family. It's cool to like makes the stuff easier. At the end of the day, you still kind of want to own what's yours. But if you're close to your family, it can still work.
Yeah, James, do you know more about the visa types in the US, like TN visa, how TN visa works? Because we have been hearing a lot of queries about TD visa, like spouses who move with their husband or wife on TD visa in the US, so they're not allowed to work in the US. What does that mean? Like they're not allowed to take salary from a US company, or if they're already if they already have clients, so how do you define that the TD workers in the US?
I guess to elaborate on Ike's question, he means like, can you have some sort of income from abroad, from outside US, or even that is not allowed in the TD visa? If you know that.
Okay, so it's the same as if you have like an F1 visa, or if you come in on a J1 or a student visa. Yeah, technically, you can't work. You can't have a job. Doing online business is a little bit of a gray area because you're not like you can't really get stopped from doing it. I tell people that they can do it all the time. I mean, this is something where there's not like you're not prohibited from owning a business or owning stuff. You can't like work a job, which is really which is really like as an employee, but as an entrepreneur, I don't think they can stop you. I mean, I don't think USCIS can stop you from being an entrepreneur. I think they
And
can.
are
It's
you
vague though.
liable to file a tax return in Canada in the US?
On a TN visa, you'd probably be filing jointly if you're living in the US, and then yes, you would have to include it all, probably on the Schedule C. It's different for people on student visas. Generally, if you're living and working in the US and making money, sure, you should probably you're very likely required, based on your own set of facts, to file an income tax return and report all your income and pay taxes on it.
And
That's based
same,
on yeah.
mhm. Yeah, same works for the TD visa.
Yeah, I guess TD is a TN spouse. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
TN spouse. So
but
he's required to report the tax return.
are those folks allowed to work abroad outside of Canada, like working remotely in the States for a Canadian company, for example?
I mean, potentially, it depends if they're working as a consultant. It's hard to like, you just can't be employed through the like regular like employment law. That's what I understand. I think you can
Yes.
still consult and you can still kind of manage that, but it's again a gray area. It doesn't say like you're not allowed to do any consulting ever. It just doesn't. Not including that.
It doesn't also make sense, like if you move to if you move to US on a TD visa, so you can't doing your own stuff. You can't stop doing your own stuff. Like if you're running a consulting business, so you'll continue building your clients. So I don't think so. It applies to the
Yeah,
consulting work.
I don't think so too. I think it's something that isn't specifically stated. I ask immigration attorneys, and they don't give you a good answer.
Yes.
I can tell you from a tax perspective, like for especially for student visas, I get the question a lot. Your days in the U.S. don't count as days for residence, but if you're earning income in the U.S., it's technically subject to tax here. So
Correct.
oftentimes, if you have a foreign family member and you can put the company in their name, that's great. But if you want to just, you have to operate. If you're here and you're living and working, you should be probably paying taxes here, or at least doing something like that.
Mhm.
And it's just not clear as to what you can and can't do from an immigration perspective.
We've talked a lot about in the last video about charging Canadians or foreigners having LLCs in the US, and then if they want to nil it out, they charge a management fee to zero it out, and then there's nothing left in the LLC, right? James, in your scenario, in your practice or people that you know, other accountants, till what what amount is that safe? Like, I'm guessing if you have a $10 million revenue and you do a $10 million management fee, that's not going to work. Like, where?
If you're using an LLC and you have no U.S. business, then there's no there's no transfer pricing agreement that would really apply. If the income isn't subject to tax, you can send it all out if you wanted to from the U.S. side. I don't see how they would. If it's not subject to tax, I don't see how the U.S. would give you hard times for shifting profits away from the U.S. when it's not subject to tax anyways.
And what forms you'll file in the US for this LLC? Like if you're sending all the profits back to the country where you are residing, so what forms you'll file in the US?
Just
Well,
5470?
it depends what kind of how the ownership is in the LLC, but a single member LLC files a form 5472 and a multi-member LLC files the 1065. And the 5472 form for a single member LLC will just report the related party transaction. So you just report that total sent, but you don't have to report like what percentage of income it is. You don't have to do that. And for a partnership return at 1065, yeah, you have to put income and expenses and disclose it and then have a loss. I have a return and review right now I have to get through that has like a similar thing. They had like 30 million in sales and their profits like $100,000.
Do you know of a case that IRS has started to audit it? Perhaps not gotten successful, but just started an audit on it?
I mean, I don't have any on the top of my head that I can think of about, but there definitely are cases. I mean, of transfer pricing agreements not being done. Generally, it's because, and I've had the IRS audit transfer pricing agreements. I was working with they had over. When I worked in public, there was this company. I tell this story sometimes. It was a retail company. They did over $1 billion in sales every year, so it was a pretty big company, and they got a transfer pricing agreement. They had a U.S. corporation and they had an offshore corporation that did all the manufacturing, and they sent it to the U.S. company. Um, and they were basically not pricing it the right way with the right transfer pricing agreement. They got audited, but that's a huge amount of money, and that was like obviously like a way more. That's a U.S. corp, a foreign corp, and they manufacture their own goods. So it's like they can manipulate the pricing. So that's that's like the definition of when you need transfer pricing. You have no defense, right? They has no defense for that one. So they just had to work it out and get the best deal possible with the IRS. And they had at the end of the case, the IRS decided they had to recognize a certain margin on their sales and a certain profit margin. So I had to do a journal entry every year to make sure that they were hitting that profit margin. And that's kind of how they did it.
Opening bank accounts, that's always a trouble for people. And I know you help with that. Any tips on that? Like, that's like Wise, Mercury. How easy, how difficult are they?
Yeah, I see a lot of Canadians coming to me and they're using RBC Canadian accounts for their US companies, but they close those pretty quick. They don't seem very good to work with.
Why did they close those?
No, I mean the banks close them because if you spend money outside of Canada, they're just particular about what you can do. I'm not that familiar with it. I just heard of clients that have that issues like the banks kind of just closing accounts for no reason. But I don't have that many clients that do it, or there was one last week. Yeah, so my tips for opening bank accounts, what we always help our clients with is we make sure that that our clients have the company set up the right way. We give good business addresses for our clients, so having a good business address is really helpful. When you apply for the banks, you want to emphasize all that you're doing in the U.S. Even though with the government you de-emphasize that, with the banks you want to emphasize it. So with the U.S. bank account application, you want to say, "Oh yeah, we have so many clients in the U.S. We have providers in the U.S. We're here all the time. We work like basically exclusively in the U.S." Whereas with the IRS, you want to de-emphasize that. And you say, "Oh, we just have some contractors in the U.S. and some clients, but it's really like we don't do any work in the U.S." So that's really important for applying. It's good to be able to travel in person is a great option. If you can come to Miami, there's a number of different bankers that can work with you. Especially if you have a Florida LLC, they're a little bit easier to deal with at times. But that's kind of it. I mean, it's to know the right people, have the right contacts, make the right, complete your application correctly, and have good information, like good LLCs, good documents, good addresses.
What you still talk about good addresses? What about Wyoming LLCs and those like Sheridan addresses?
Well, I mean, if 50,000 other people have the same address, it's not a good address. That's the problem with the mail forwarding addresses. When you open an LLC in Wyoming and you just pay for the virtual address as a Sheridan address, the banks don't want to work with you. I mean, it's just what we've seen. The banks, I talk to people every day who's had their accounts closed or who can't open an account because they're just using that LLC mail forwarding address. And we use a number of different addresses that we have in Miami for our Wyoming LLCs. It works great. So I have a couple of videos on my channel about how to get unique mailing addresses. You can just go to an American city and talk to a real estate agent, look around and rent a place, and then use that. That's a lot of what I do. You're renting offices. Uh, or knowing someone who has an office. If you have a really good friend who has a warehouse in a state, use their address, and that would probably work. You can look up the addresses that people use with tools, and you can see if they're registered as commercial mail receiving addresses or mail forwarding addresses. So I have a number of different contacts I use. We include the mailing address as part of our service, so we're not really a commercial mailing receiving agency. These are like limited use, private use kind of things. So we don't have to deal with that, but you can look up the addresses and make sure that they're not coded improperly because that's the banks use similar systems.
So does it make a concern like obviously most people want to go to Wyoming because of the simplicity, because of the privacy. Over there's not that many options, right? For actual offices, or people don't know folks, right? Like I'm guessing the bank, obviously you need to have your registered agent there. The bank's not going to be okay with you having a Florida address for a Wyoming LLC.
Yeah, we do that for all our clients. It's fine. As long as it's a real address, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay.
There's only like 20 buildings in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was there a couple of years ago. I had an office. I had a real office there for a while. Um, I actually went there, rented an office, and had like a person who would forward mail from the office. I paid. It wasn't too expensive, but it was hard to get people to forward the mail and deal with the compliance over there. But there's like 30 buildings in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And it's like not a very populated state. So you can definitely use addresses in other places. At least it works for us and all of our clients, which we're doing a good number of clients here.
You mean other states?
Well, using Wyoming, but using addresses from other states.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for your questions. Great conversation. If you are interested in talking to a CPA out of Canada, we'll have Salman and his link, Sal Accounting, in the description. And obviously, if you need help setting up a U.S. company, doing your U.S. compliance or tax work, you can schedule a free call with me and the team today. JamesBakerCPA.com/schedule. Thanks for being here, guys, and we'll talk soon.